So those of you who are watching the videos of this class after the meeting, you'll notice it's in two parts, and there's a significant gap when I lost internet on the home computer, but it's working for now. So this is a continuation of the fourth class.
So this is a wonderful test of our concentration, and I hope that you all still been in each other's hearts this whole time, because here we are in each other's presence. So we're going to continue with landscapes for you.
And sometimes there's technical difficulties even in the bar zone, so solar flares and whatnot. So, well, this is another landscape, and sometimes there are landscapes associated with particular divine names. And actually the one that I shared earlier, the landscape of ice and snow, is associated with the divine name Kudus, Q-U-D-D-U-S, which means pure spirit. And the landscape I'm going to have us go through now is associated with two wazifas, wazaif, Wahabo, W-A-H-H-A-B-O, which is the outpouring of your divine qualities, the outpouring of your divine inheritance, the way that that's configured uniquely in your being into life. And the image is you're standing in front of a river that's flowing from left to right. So the waters are just flowing to the right in the river. But then there's a wind that's blowing opposite the direction of the flowing of the stream. It's blowing upstream. So there's just a little bit of a current that's going in the opposite direction back to the source. And the divine name associated with this is pronounced Vehedo, even though it's spelled with a W, W-E-H-E-D-O, Vehedo, and it means a return to the source. So it's, again, it's this twofold pattern that we've come to over and over again, the descent into manifestation and the return back to the source that's going on all of the time. So we can actually do these practices together for a little bit, and as we do them, just imagine this image of being in front of the river. The main current is going from left to right, but there's the wind blowing a part of the water back to the left upstream, and that's on the Veheto part. So it's Yahwahabo, W-A-H-H-A-B-O, and then Yahvehedo. And we'll do it the pair 11 times together. Yahwahabo, Yahvehedo, 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 Yahwahabo, Yahvehedo. And then what's called the fikr, done silently on the breath without the Yah. So we think Wahabo as we exhale, and we think Vehedo as we inhale. So do this at your own rate for a little bit. Still keeping the imagery. And then just the feeling without the words or the image.
So now we have some of the components that we might be able to put together or the ways to identify some of these places within us that are significant to us, that are archetypal kinds of situations that somehow reflect our own lives. In the spiritual history, we have had beings who characteristically will write their own visionary recitals, they call them, or allegories of their soul, that kind of describe the, sometimes they call it the curve of their spiritual development. It usually will, begin with some difficulties in life or excited maybe situations when they were a child, and then kind of build through different climax of some sort that transforms their whole life, usually at a very difficult time. And then after that, some realizations perhaps, and so perhaps now some gatherings where you get join up with some other beings that are similar to you, and then traveling for a while with these beings, and then perhaps accomplishments that you all create together. And each time there's I'm thinking now of music. If it were composed with music, perhaps there would be a change at this point, bringing in great, huge emotional climaxes of music, and kind of reaching a peak and influencing all of creation based on what they have accomplished. And you see how this would be a story that could really tell the story of your entire life. And you as an artist perhaps have created things like this, but what the beings in our history that have done this, there was one named Atar, and was about the Conference of the Birds. So he kind of carved out a story like I was talking to you about, but it was through birds and the Conference of the Birds and what they found. And they went to a kingdom and talked to the king, and found out, they looked in a mirror and found out they were the ones that were sitting on the throne. So it's a wonderful archetypal story. And so how would you write a story like that? What here we're giving you ideas of how to begin, but it's really about starting to listen to your own heart and the things that have been closest to you and have touched you the deepest. And we'll find that these have been intimations of, you could say, our twin soul, our celestial self, that's telling us, oh yes, you are getting closer to your secret. This is part of your unique contribution, yes. So we begin tuning to these things and bringing them forward, and maybe bringing spiritual practices, telling our spiritual guide, this is what I'm working with, something beautiful, and I'm unfolding it, and what kind of wazifa would go with this? Make it the subject of your spiritual journey, and you'll be quite surprised. Would you like to add to this?
Yeah, some different thoughts. Well, one thought that came to me today, it's something I'd thought of some time ago, but I'd forgotten about it, is when we work with any one of the divine qualities, it's kind of the conduit or the means by which we are joining these two sides of our being together and having both an experience of the two sides coming together, but also the way that particular divine quality is realized and expressed through us in life and how it's changed through us. So just any particular quality, such as Jamil for beauty. But the thing that I had forgotten that I thought of some time ago was, if you remember back to your high school chemistry, the periodic table of the elements. Imagine a periodic table, but instead of the different kinds of atoms, which are the elements of the usual periodic table, the elements are the divine names. And there's some that are similar. In fact, they're often grouped, like there's some that have to do with outpourings, like Zahir and Wahabo, and there's some that have to do with internal dimensions, such as Batan, and there's some related to mercy and compassion, and there's some that are very transcendent, and so on. And so these would correspond to, like, the different metals are all in one column on the periodic table. So you can imagine there's different groupings for directions of manifestation and returning, and these are associated with light, and these are associated with energy, and these are associated with relationships, and so on. But what do you do with the atoms in the periodic table? Well, they form the elements, and what happens with the elements? Well, they come together and form molecules, and what happens with the molecules? Well, they come together and form the cells that we're made of and the substance of everything that we experience. So we could say on the subtle level, and Hazra Inayat Khan talks about this, he says, just like there's physical atoms in physical manifestation, there's subtle atoms on every realm of existence. So imagine that these subtle atoms are like these elements of this periodic table of the divine names of different qualities that are experienced in different ways depending on the realm that our consciousness is focalized in. Well, that really opens up lots of possibilities. And in talking about the allegory of our soul, and as Ravani Rao was saying, there's all these beautiful stories. Ibn Arabi has a book about a tree and birds, and that's part of his allegory. And there's a whole book by Corbin about Avicenna's allegory of his soul. And there's the story of the Prophet Muhammad's journey of his soul. And we might think, well, that's fine. These are great beings, prophets from the past of the different traditions that couldn't have anything to do with me. Well, something I've often thought of is that all the world's scriptures, and they came about at different times in the history of mankind, are kind of the ongoing dialogue journal. Nowadays we'd call it the blog of the human-divine relationship, how it's unfolded and the state that it's in. And now the state that it's in, and the Prophet Muhammad said that he was the last of the prophets. It was a seal of the prophets. But now each of us is living our own allegory of our soul. And we might think, well, creating it like, okay, we're going to sit and think, well, this, I think we would like it to be some of this and some of that. But I was thinking, as Ravani Rao was talking, that the pen, so to speak, of the allegory of our soul is our heart, and the ink and the pages are the unfolding experiences of our life, especially when we're in this state of relational unity, when we're in the newness of new creation unfolding at every instant. But we have a particular impetus or direction or momentum of how our story unfolds. It's not just random. We're not just buffeted around like a leaf in a current. We are bringing forth, we're going to be talking about desire in the upcoming classes, how our desire helps to configure the direction of unfoldment of the allegory of our soul, which isn't pre-written. It's not like, well, it's sitting there and we're just going, okay, this is what the next chapter is supposed to be, or this is what I think it should be. When it's really cooking, it's alive and fresh and oftentimes full of surprises and unexpected things.
Well, I love what you said about the heart being the pen that is writing our story. And I certainly feel so much bursting forth in our class tonight. I feel there's a big communication among all of us too, and what's going on. Um, and I have to say that as we discover these things, and we know I don't have a direction, we might think, no, I don't have a direction, I'm not sure where I'm going with this. Well, we can go with what we are loving and what we have already done in our lives, and go with, again, we've been kind of crashing around in the darkness, not really knowing, well, what is this visionary and creative capacity of our soul? This is kind of a lot of words put it together here, but how do I find this? Well, you find it in looking at your own desire. And we'll be, like he says, I would like to talk much more about desire in our last two classes. Uh, but we find that that which we are being attracted to and that which is propelling us on, uh, is that desire, that it's that divine within us that has been placed there. Remember, this whole creation was God wanting uh, to be loved, and God wanting to love, God wanting to experience our own love. So God wants to have these experiences. And it is through us that she is having this amazing experience. So there's a wonderful term in Christian theology, the theophore, the God bearer. And of course, you can think of our dear Mary, Mother, carrying God, but you each are carrying God, and you are birthing this story. And the story, as it unfolds, there is the uniqueness of your being, but as it unfolds, it becomes more and more the story of everything. It becomes everyone's story. You think it is a private situation, maybe we feel ashamed of it, or maybe we feel, some cold feeling about it. But as we learn how to unfold it, we find that it is what everyone is wanting. And it is all of our desires that is bringing this beauty and bringing the unfoldment of all of us, the unfoldment of the light and the brightening of this Varna, of which we are all made.
And in our invocation that we start our classes with, toward the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the spirit of guidance. So what is the spirit of guidance? So one way we could think about it is that we have a path that we're supposed to be on, and the spirit of guidance kind of nudges us when we're getting off the path and helps us to unfold in the right direction. And that's a perfectly valid way of thinking about it. But perhaps a deeper way of thinking about it is the spirit of guidance is also the other half of this twofold pull that we've done practices to experience the human and divine, each longing for the other. So the spirit of guidance is that longing for something to come forth in us, to be born into existence, into our lives, that becomes available to all parts of existence that can only come through us. So it's answering the call of that pull that isn't prefigured or predetermined what it's supposed to be. So in that sense, it's the way that I've come to think about Gabriel, the twofold aspects of Gabriel, more than just the Annunciation, bringing the message down from the divine into manifestation, but also returning the all that's been gained through our life experience back to the divine, fulfilling that longing that was the cause of our creation in the first place, that hidden treasure desiring to be known. And this process, the miracle of it all, isn't just a one-time deal. Okay, our souls were created, and at some point we'll be finished and go back to where we came from. It's something that is renewed at every single instant. And as Ibn Arabi says, what's renewed is never the same as what was there before. It's similar, but it's never the same thing. It's always unfolding. It's always to our own delight, and we could say to the delight of the divine being, because Not even God knows what's next in the story. Because if God did, imagine uh, if you were on a desert island for all eternity, uh, and you always knew how every book that you had in your library was going to turn out. Well, for a while it'd be interesting, but after a while you'd be bored to tears. It wouldn't be anything. And you think, well, what was the point of it all? What's the point if something more didn't come from it than what the initial conditions were to start with? So we are all a part of the allegory of God's soul. And think about that for a minute. And each of our stories, each of our parts is like, think of a cosmic drama, and each of us is cast in a role, and the roles change uh, over time in this life and even beyond this life in different subtle realms. But the whole cosmic drama is unfolding a story, and the director doesn't know what the outcome is going to be because the story is never ended. There's no end to the acts of this story. And I don't know about you, but I get a rush just thinking about that. So here we are. Uh, what kind of world do we want to create? That's a good place to stop.
Yeah.